Hey guys, welcome back to the next big countdown here, and of course I am back again with my very good friend John Stanek from Johnny Radio here to bring you the top 100 albums of the 21st century. Long time in the making, obviously. Obviously I was very looking forward to this. I'm very familiar with a lot of stuff from recent years, as I know John is as well. Certainly going to be the most interesting list. We'll put it that way for now. But hey, man, I can't wait to get into it. And yeah.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming, and so much work went into this one. Over 1,400 albums
Wow.
that you all voted for, just insane. And it is really kind of all over the place, as I kind of thought it would be. And yeah, there's definitely going to be some differing opinions, some things that we don't like, perhaps, and yeah, we'll see how it goes, but I think it's going to be super interesting, and especially I think we have to say this is the top 100 of the 21st century so far, because we cut it off at May 29th, and actually there was something I listened to that came out last week that would have possibly made my list had we not cut it off. So and who knows what this will look like 20 years in the future, but so far this is the best of the century, I suppose.
Well, all right. I guess with that introduction, we might as well get right into it, starting with number 100.
I've never seen a diamond in the flesh.
Pure Heroine by Lorde from 2013, her debut album, the New Zealand native making her big splash with, of course, the big single Royals, which, the first time I heard it, I was really transfixed by her voice, especially she has such a knack for melody as well as harmonies. Man, she brings in these multiple voices that are all her, and she's got such a big range. She keeps her voice very low throughout the song through the main vocal, but then she brings in these high harmonies that are just beautiful, and really just I love how sparse overall the production is throughout this album. It's really kind of like here she is front and center, and on songs like Tennis Court, which has this kind of moody and dark opening, you kind of get a little bit of what you're in for the record. But even though there's a couple songs that are a little slower and maybe don't hold up as much, songs like Buzzcut Season, which has this kind of Latin percussion vibe to it. Of course, another great standout single, Team. I also love White Teeth Teens, which for some reason her lyrics tend to be about teeth a lot on this album. Some of the lyrics are kind of out there, and I can see why some people might just think that Lorde is weird and maybe even overrated at the time that this came out. But I think time's been good to this album. I think it's still, in my opinion, I think it's still her best outing as a really strong debut. Others may disagree with that, but I'm glad that this one made the list as low as it is. I'm surprised it was this low, to be honest.
Uh, hmm. I think I'm glad it's not any higher. I look. Here's the thing, right? I don't dislike this album because, I mean, let's be honest. Royals is a modern classic. It's not better than Stairway to Heaven or All Along the Watchtower, like Rolling Stone says. An amazing song. I love Team as well, but and I don't know if this is any fault of her own, but I feel like Lorde ruined pop music for the next 10 years
Hmm.
because her approach to synth pop on I don't know, like I'm almost kind of shocked like that you love this, because like considering like artists that I love that you
Hmm.
aren't as big on, I was like, really? Like I don't get this. Like, she's talented. As you said, I do love her voice. It's a very iconic, very recognizable. But like this album, just the sparse synth pop of this, I feel like a lot of the melodies are just so bland. It's so spacious to the point where I just feel like music became so watered down after she came out with this album.
Hmm.
And I really don't think that pop music was ever the same way again. So yeah, it's influential, but I say at what cost? I don't know. Like, to me, really,
I don't know that I
Royals.
would call it that influential, but
I think so. I
yeah.
do.
Well, maybe so on in that kind of style, perhaps, but um, I don't know. I know right off the bat we're not going to see eye to eye on everything, but I did have this on my list, and I'm just going to say
Yeah.
most of the things that were on my list did not make this final list. So I'm happy that I got at least one on this episode so far.
Well, I was gonna say too, like, I'm not a fan at all of like pitch shifting either, where it's like she's singing like this and then
She's singing like this.
and it's
Yeah.
just like it's just so tired. It's so I hate it. It's just obnoxious, and I feel like that happens quite a few times. Though I will say I think it does work on Team, but I think that's because that song's melody is so strong
Yeah.
and so
I think you got to give her a
immediate.
break too, considering how young she was when this came out. Like,
Sure,
for
I mean,
somebody that's in her teens to release something that's this monstrous of a tidal wave in popular music is pretty impressive.
okay, but I still and that is a good point, but I still feel like just how mainstream pop has become. And look, I'm not going to be one of those people who says, "Oh, like, oh, there's not a lot of great mainstream artists," because there are, and you'll see that as we go on and I talk about some of these albums and records or artists who have made this list. But I mean, it's nothing compared to the time where both, the Beatles and Dylan were charting the top 10, and like Hendrix and like all these, like, I
Yeah.
just feel like the way music went after this, what was like marketed, I just feel like it became very dull, generic, lifeless, and I feel like this was kind of like the start of that, and that's why I say I don't want
I
to fault
get
her
that.
completely for that, because I got to give credit where credit's due. I love Royals, I think it's amazing, and I love Team as well, but I just
Yeah, the synth pop
yeah.
aspect of it, like I get what you're saying there, but I do disagree with you on the melodies. I think she has some really intricate melodies on this album throughout, and really catchy at that too. So especially the on all the harmonies that she does throughout the album, I was really blown away by that. And I personally do like the simplicity of the music. I was just saw an interview with Rick Rubin recently, not to get on a tangent, but he tends to try to strip down music, he was saying, to the bare essentials. And I think that happened to work for Lorde on this album. Maybe, like you said, it influenced other people to do it in ways that wasn't as good over the last 10 years, but I dug it. So
Well, I'll say no one did it better, but hey man, I just listened to this again and I can't remember like any of the other melodies on this album besides those two songs. So I don't know. I'm not happy to see it here, but like I guess I kind of get it. I don't know. But hey, there you go. Pure
right.
heroin.
there it is. Well, that brings us on to number 99. Bottomless Pit by Death Grips from 2016. The trio of, I guess you would call it digital hardcore. I was new to this band and I just listened to this album a couple days ago. And I'm going to be honest with you. I felt like I was being tortured listening to this thing. I found myself like wanting to skip nearly every track, but I did listen to the whole thing. The only track I didn't feel like that 100% on was one called Bubbles Buried in This Jungle, track 6. But the rest of it, yeah, man, I felt like I needed to like take my brain out and wash it after listening to this record. It's, just not my cup of tea, obviously. And I don't know. Hopefully this is not the future of music, in my opinion, but, a lot of people love this, and it's, making me kind of, I know this is all subjective, but people like Anthony Fantano giving this such high praise makes me kind of reconsider um, his take on music in general. So that's all I have to say
Oh,
about it.
whoa,
I
whoa,
don't
okay.
recommend it, and I'm not happy about this being on the list. But yeah, that's you're gonna see me be a grouchy old man on this
Yeah,
countdown, and this is not the last time. I'm just warning you.
yeah. So I haven't heard this, and I know a lot of people love Death Grip, so I'm going to reserve judgment. I don't know how I
Yeah,
feel about that comment you made,
yeah.
but
Well, maybe I'll lose some subscribers, but it's all good.
that's what this countdown is going to test more than anything.
Yeah,
Hey, I mean, I'm excited to listen to it. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to feel this way. So I wish I
Well,
could put up more of an argument, but
just
I'm
say that
still
you've
making
been
my way through.
warned. So,
I'll reserve judgment till I hear it. So, okay, there you go. Sorry I can't say much more on that, but yeah, that's going to take us to number 98.
The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me by Brand New from 2006. I'm glad that this made the list. It didn't quite make my list. I had a different album from Brand New, which I like more, called Daisy, which came out a few years later. But this is still a really strong outing. This was really them uh, becoming more of, I guess, off the heels of their second album, Deja Entendu, which was a little more in the emo punk rock kind of vein. This was them getting a little bit more exploratory, just a little bit more grown up, especially in their songwriting. Lyrically, Jesse Lacey has some really powerful stuff on here, starting with the song "Sowing Season," which is just a really heavy opener. I guess you would call this an alt rock album overall, but these guys can get pretty heavy with songs like De Gausser and Limousine. But for me, the clear standout track on here is track 3, Jesus Christ, where it's such a beautiful tune with that arpeggiated guitar leading the way through. It's I guess you would call it a ballad. It does build up quite a bit towards the end, though, where it comes to this crescendo with that amazing lyric where he says, "We all got wooden nails and we turn out hate in factories." It's just, I really think it's like one of the most brilliant songs of that decade. So I'm definitely glad that Brand New is represented here on the list, and I think a lot of people would agree that this album deserves to make it. So yeah, glad it's here.
Well, once again, I cannot say anything about this because I have not heard them. But hey, that's pretty solid praise all around. I certainly have seen this album cover before too. So like when I saw it made the list, I recognized that at the very least. But hey, that's the point of this countdown in some ways, to discover this music I haven't heard yet. When am I going to check it out? I don't know, but I certainly do hope to check it out fairly soon. So yeah, it seems like a good choice on this list, guys. And yeah, that's going to take us to number 97.
I was following the eye, was following the eye, was
Fleet Foxes from 2008, the self-titled debut album from this indie folk rock band. Very, very interesting, this record. Obviously, all the songs are written by Robin Pecknold here, and you can certainly see the influence that this album has had on pop music. But really, when I was first listening to this, it really reminded me, the first few tracks, of the Grateful Dead. It definitely gave me very Dead-esque vibes with the kind of like instrumentation. They're doing the very kind of like laid back sort of almost medieval-esque sense of melody and instrumentation. The chamber pop on here is very well done from top to bottom. Obviously, I think the biggest song on here is White Winter Hymnal, which, believe it or not, one of my favorite Christmas albums, That's Christmas to Me from Pentatonics, which did make my personal list. I remember they covered it on here, and I didn't love it. It didn't make me like, oh, like what's this song? But when I heard it here, I was like, oh, it's from these guys, and I think that's certainly one of the highlights on the album. I also love Ragged Wood. That one I think is really great, even though it kind of slows down in the middle. And I remember really loving Quiet Houses as well. I just feel like even though this style is well done, like I can see the influence it had on indie pop, in the 2010s, for better or for worse, the very grandiose backing vocals with all the reverb on them, which everyone killed in the next decade to death. But I really think what is done here is impressive in that sense. I just feel like a lot of the songs lyrically aren't, very, I guess, interesting. Not that, well, not. I don't know if interesting is the word. More so, I don't think they're like the most tactful, and I just think the songs kind of blend together after a while. So would I put this on my list? No, but then again, like, who am I to say? I don't know what to tell you, but I did like this. I don't think it's like a great record or anything, but I can see the influence.
Yeah, I kind of feel a similar way. I really enjoyed it. I'm new to Fleet Foxes as well. Actually, I had heard some of their latter albums before this one, and this one I like the most out of what I've heard thus far. And I definitely I can see that Grateful Dead influence makes a little sense. I would also even say Beach Boys based on the elaborate harmonies, even though they're a little bit more like you said, kind of like almost like an medieval kind of sound, which yeah, the songs do kind of eventually sort of all blend together. I felt like Blue Ridge Mountains was a good highlight though, towards the end of the album. I found that one to be really beautiful. But yeah, this wasn't on my list either, obviously, but I can see the appeal. Just I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I'm not upset about it,
Yeah.
But hey, I as I said, like I respect it, but not something I would put on the list personally. But hey, you guys voted on here, and here it is. So there you go. Now that's going to take us right to number 96.
Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers from 2020. This was an indie rock album that was at the top of a lot of charts that year. And I remember checking it out not right after it was released, but several months later. It's been a while since I've listened to it, to be honest with you. But it was an album that didn't really stand out to me that much overall. It just felt... I don't want to say boring, but I don't know. I guess I was expecting a little more excitement on this album. Although there were some songs that stood out, like Kyoto. I remember she did a performance on Saturday Night Live as well, and I don't recall the songs. I think that was one of them, but and she like smashed an acoustic guitar, I think, on one of the songs. But the song that was the most exciting part of that performance. Up until then, even the performance I recall was just as the kids would say these days, mid. That's kind of how I feel about this record. But obviously, a lot of you love it, and it made the list, so I can't really fault it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to get into her for a while, and I feel so ill-equipped in this episode, so I apologize. No, I mean, this is something I definitely want to get into. I still want to start with her first couple records first, but yeah, as I've heard, a lot of good things about this when it came out, and I hear Phoebe Bridgers get thrown around all the time, so it's definitely something I am looking forward to getting into actually quite soon, as opposed to some of the other albums, which I might take a little while to get to personally. But yeah, I'm excited to hear this, and I'm glad that you guys brought more awareness to this, I suppose. But yeah, so I don't have much more to say on it, and yeah, that will take us to number 95.
Lonerism by Tame Impala from 2012. This is, I would say, it's hard to really put it in a category, but it's kind of like modern day psychedelic rock. A lot of it sounds very Beatlesque, as a matter of fact, especially the vocal by Kevin Parker, who really does just a little bit of everything as Tame Impala. His vocal sounds a lot like John Lennon in the Revolver era. And yeah, it's really, I found it to be kind of a breath of fresh air. I was just listening to it for the first time this past week. I had heard some of his other stuff that was more recent, some years back, and I kind of liked it okay, but I never really got into him per se. But yeah, this album overall was really kind of a joy to listen to. I really liked Apocalypse Dreams. I felt that was a big standout. Let me see. A lot of these songs kind of flow into one another, but I remember Elephant being one that I thought was really cool rhythmically as well. There's almost kind of like I don't know if there would be, I would say that there's like a Beck influence, but I could see that being in there as well with some of the way that these songs kind of just flow and have really just kind of enjoyable rhythms to them as well. But yeah, I really dug it, and I'm glad that he's accounted for here on the list.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about Tame Impala for a while, especially as some of my friends who like older music primarily as well. Like a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is cool," like rock music, great, band to get into, and so I was looking forward to this. I liked their debut album decently enough. I thought it was pretty cool. Look, I mean, if he is performing all these instruments on his own, like I gotta give him a lot of credit. He's super talented guy, as Kevin Parker, and it almost sounds like he resurrected John Lennon from the dead. He sounds just like John Lennon, and it's actually insane. Maybe this is the music John Lennon would have been making if he was still alive. I don't know.
It's possible.
It very well could be. I feel like he always had that creative gene in him, as opposed to some of the other Beatles. But yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a lot of cool production on here, very psychedelic in a very modern way. I really do like songs like "Why Won't They Talk to Me" and the instrumentals on them, especially the guitar solo on the end of that, or I think it was on "Keep on Lying," was just incredible. It just blew my mind. I also really like "Elephant," which has a very propulsive beat, which was actually covered by the Wiggles, believe it or not. Almost hard to believe, but it was covered by the Wiggles, and definitely a standout track on this album. Look, I mean, personally, I'm not as into this as much, and maybe it's because of the excessive reverb on his voice. Yeah, I think really it's more mood music than anything, and I respect and appreciate it. I get the appeal. Yeah, but I'm not. I would actually give this the same score as I would Pure Heroine, I suppose, but maybe I like it a little bit more. Just not really something that I can sink my teeth into that much, but like I understand the appeal of it, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool.
Sure. All right. Well, hey, made the Tame Impala's on the list, so there you go, Tame Impala fans. And yeah, that's going to take us to number 94.
Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park from the year 2000. Yeah, I'm glad this made the list. This did make my list. It was around this spot on mine, actually. So I think this is a pretty good spot for it. I love Linkin Park. I think they actually went on to do some even better things after this record, but what a powerful debut, just right out of the gate with songs like Paper Cut and the very intense One Step Closer with Chester Bennington, who had such a great singing voice and screaming voice, when he gets to that point in the song where he's saying, shut up when I'm talking to you. It's just like, yeah, man, such a release. This whole album is just really great workout music. songs like Points of Authority. Of course, Crawling was a huge breakout single. For me, I would have to say In the End is my favorite track.
Yeah.
Just overall the production, the marriage of Chester singing with Mike Shinoda's rapping, which I think is probably his strongest on the record on that track. It's one of those songs that everybody can relate to. The piano sample, and I gotta say, like, Johan is like an MVP of the band. Like all the things that he does behind the turntable and more. Also, A Place for My Head is such a strong song to hear live. I had the opportunity to see them live.
Oh wow.
Back in that was on the A Thousand Suns tour back in 2010. And
Okay.
incredible show. Like they did all the hits, and yeah, it was just they opened actually with Paper Cut, which was really cool. But yeah, I love this record, and so glad that Linkin Park made the list.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was huge on new metal. Obviously, like at the turn of the century, that was when it was becoming big. I feel like this band is a combination of like all the '90s bands thrown together, especially Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and Rage Against the Machine. I think, and Green Day.
Sure.
I think stand out particularly. This band's sound. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, Chester Bennington had an incredible voice, though I think some of the screaming on this album, was it the song By Myself where he's like going insane?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that. But look, I think the thing with this album, I'm just not really I guess I'm not big on Mike Shinoda's rapping. It's a little like white bread cringe for me, just a little bit, but not
It's a
to
little
say that he isn't
simplistic.
talented.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of stuck out to me. I felt like a lot of the songs sounded the same, but sonically I did really enjoy it. Certainly a few standouts. I do love Forgotten. I love the Johan track, Cure for the Itch. It kind of reminds me of the Public Enemy. And that's another group I like to compare them to.
Sure.
And I really loved what he did with that track sonically. But obviously, far and away, the best song on this record, maybe the best Linkin Park song of all time, is In the End. I remember when I was growing up, this was on the radio all the time, and just that triumphant chorus. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I mean, how can you not just want to?
And
belt
even the
that out?
rapping, one
Yeah.
thing, I don't know why. It doesn't even
Yeah,
matter how
it's-
hard you try. Like,
it's like-
it's right there in your head, you know?
It's the definitions of a 2000s iconic classic. I mean, really, I think when I was a kid growing up, it was such a great decade for pop music on the radio. I mean, oh my goodness. And not only do I have nostalgia for it, but it was actually really, really great songs like this and Daft Punk at the same time on the radio. My goodness. But yeah, I'm not as huge on this record. I think it's a good album. I can see why it made the list. But yeah, so obviously I'm glad to see Linkin Park represented on here. And I think most people would go with their debut album. So certainly a good choice on this list. And that is going to take us to number 93. The Fame by Lady Gaga from 2008. My goodness, I just started listening to Lady Gaga recently, and obviously I started with this album, her debut. My goodness, the first half of this album is like banger after banger. It's just unbelievable, especially with the three standout singles. Just Dance, obviously, was such a huge hit, so infectious. Paparazzi is maybe my favorite song on this record, and of course Poker Face, with that pop 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 poker face, pop pop poker face. I mean, it's just so
was
iconic.
everywhere. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you can see like just how influenced she is by Gwen Stefani and Madonna. I mean, I feel like she owes her entire career to those two women, essentially. But here's the thing with this album. I do like this album. It's good. Knowing some of the things that got left off this list, I'm kind of scratching my head a little bit, because let's be honest, half of as great as a lot of these songs are, half the album just sucks. I mean, and I think that shows you how great those pop hits are if I'm talking this highly about it. But like something like Boys, 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 or, you know, Paper Gangster, like,
Yeah.
oh my god, it's just bad. It's just straight up bad. I've never understood Lady Gaga as like a great songwriter. Like, she's written some great songs. I mean, especially talking about Stars Born, you know, and Shallow, which won her the Oscar. I mean, she obviously has the capability. Incredible singer, great person, amazing actress. I think she might even be a better actress than she is a songwriter and artist. But, you know, I mean, I get it. The hits are amazing, but honestly, if it was a greatest hits album, it might have made more sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really see how, you know, this made the list, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with actually every single thing you just said. So, I don't really have much to add other than as much as I do love Poker Face, I might like the Christopher Walken version even more. So,
okay.
His reading of it is hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Check
I remember. I do remember something with that.
But yeah, I mean, I get this, like, making the list, and I'm glad that we have, like, you know, some pop stuff to mix it up. But I agree, there's some other stuff that could have made it, and this being above Linkin Park, I just I don't know about that, man.
I'm okay with that, but well, maybe it's just kind of enjoyable. But then at the same time, like, what's more consistent than what, you know? It's just me kind of removing myself from the equation. But I just think that there are better pop artists in that vein that are more artistically interesting and kind of boundary pushing that didn't make the list, and we won't say who right now. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of my gripe with it. But it's a good album.
We're gonna have a very long snubs episode at the end of this countdown, I think.
Maybe not as long as the 70s, but
yeah,
I think there's a lot to talk about.
Oh yeah.
But hey, you know, it's a good album, so nice to see it on the list. And yeah, that will take us to number 92. Cheat Codes by none other than Danger Mouse and Black Thought, obviously the legendary hip-hop producer and the lead MC from The Roots. Now, I think you guys might know I love The Roots. I mentioned them being snubbed in the 90s series, and I definitely feel like they could have made the list a couple times. But Black Thought has always stood out to me, a.k.a. Tariq Trotter, has always stood out to me as such a great MC, delivering some very, very hard-hitting verses, and really is what carries the Roots forward in what they have to say. But this is kind of funny because I almost did not listen to this album before making my list, but I was like, right before I had it in, I was like, okay, I might check this out. You know, there's a chance that I might love it. I might make the list if I really love it. It was like one of my favorites. And I think that this is, I know it just came out last year. I think this is one of the greatest hip-hop albums I've ever heard in my life. I think Danger Mouse, just what he brings to this production, these very tasteful 60s, 70s soul samples are chopped up so well. These beats are incredible, what he crafts. And then Black Thought is going off in just going like a steam train, man. I mean, his bars in this, his lyrical rhymes in this are absolutely some of the tightest, most direct, some of the most pointed I've ever heard. The rhyme schemes are incredible. I've never heard him better, and that's including the stuff he's done with The Roots. And it's just unbelievable how every song is littered with meaning and impact, talking about a lot of the socio-political disparities of the African American community, and of course what it means to be a black man living in America. I mean, there's so much that they touch on here. I love almost every single song on this in some way or shape or form. Obviously, you got the title track, which is a great way to start this record after Sometimes There. And of course, you gotta love the darkest part that features Raekwon, who has a great voice. And that hook from Kid Sister is just absolutely infectious. No Gold Teeth is another one I mean, I'm going to mention every song on here because I think is really one of my favorites as well, featuring Joey Badass, Russ and Dylan Cartilage. Just how they are all talking about their own experiences being on the streets and trying to, stay on the right side of things, trying to avoid the police. I mean, it's one of the best. I don't even know if you'd call it a posse cut, because it really, even though it has all these great MCs on there, it really feels deeply personal to each individual on the track. And then, of course, you got to mention Belize featuring the late MF Doom. And it's just crazy, like, to hear Doom on this record. I mean, it was a big shock, especially since this album came out 2 years after he passed. But my goodness, even beyond the grave, Doom proves just the fact that he's one of the greatest MCs who ever lived. And I think, basically complements Black Thought in such a brilliant way. My personal favorite track is Aquamarine on here. I just think it has one of the greatest bars on the whole record, where he's talking about, he's like, I hacked the computer, I got the files corrupted, and then it changed the code, or whatever he's saying on there. It was just absolutely brilliant, that bar, and the metaphors that he creates on this whole album. My goodness, I could go on and on about this record.
Great guest spot by Michael Kiwanuka singing on that track too. That's one of my favorites as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, like, there's just so many good solid songs on here. Strangers is another one with Run the Jewels, another highlight. But yeah, No Gold Teeth, man, was one of my favorite songs of last year, and this was one of my best albums of the year as well. And I agree with you, it's up there as like one of the best hip-hop records of all time. It probably, hopefully over time, will be considered that, because it's just so solid, man, throughout. And I remember hearing No Gold Teeth for the first time. That was the first single that was released, and I listened to it like 6 times in a row, because I was just blown away by not just the sound of it, which has just the coolest guitar sample on that track, but yeah, Black Thought, man, is just at the top of his game on this album.
Yeah, man, I think he's in the conversation, one of the greatest rappers of all time. I think without question. And this album really proves it to me. And it's just so lean, it's so mean. It's only 38 minutes long, which I think with the Roots records, as much as I do love them, they go on for over an hour. This is like straight to the point. You get the hard-hitting messages, you get the amazing lyricism and rhyme schemes from Black Thought, the amazing production from Danger Mouse. This is why I liked that we went all the way through 2023, because I'm so glad this made the list, because this personally is my album of the decade. I think that this is the best album. I'm serious. This is the best album of the 20s so far, I have to say. And I'm glad to say that I've made that choice and listened to it, because it's one of my favorite albums of all time, and I'm actually shocked by my saying so.
And I think you kind of saved it from not making the list, technically, by having it on yours. So I'm thankful for that, because this was on my list too. So
and this was in my top 10. So I think you guys can see why I really love this record. But as you said, like, over time it might become more acclaimed, because right now I think a lot of people think it's great, but they're not saying it's like one of the best. But I genuinely think this is one of the greatest hip-hop albums I've ever heard, one of the best albums I've ever heard, period. And if you guys haven't checked this out, please do yourself a favor and check out this amazing album. You won't be disappointed, especially if you're a hip-hop fan. This is everything you could want out of hip-hop, and I'm so glad that after all these years, Danger Mouse and Black Thought finally got together and made a record that I think they both should absolutely be proud of. So amazing.
I hope they do more.
Dude, honestly, I would be all down for it. I know Black Thought is coming out with a new album this year, and I certainly am going to check out his stuff, as well as continuing through the Roots. But yeah, amazing choice. Should be higher, but you guys got to check it out if you haven't. And that, guys, is going to take us to number 91. One by none other than the Beatles from 2000. Hey, I mean, they make another appearance in the 21st century. I mean, what can I tell you? Except this is one of the best compilation albums of all time, especially we're talking about greatest hits, and I think really spawned the trend of all the number one hit albums that came after, like Elvis's Top 30. This really was, I wouldn't say influential. Well, it's the Beatles, so I suppose it is. But, when it comes to that regard, it certainly is. And sure, while it has no songs from Rubber Soul, Sgt. Pepper, or the White Album, which is almost shocking. Well, maybe not the White Album, because obviously they didn't release like any singles from that. But this obviously, as the title says, all the Beatles' number one hits. So it's like, I mean, come on. Like, all the songs are great, basically. You've heard them all before, from the early stuff all the way through to Let It Be. I mean, you gotta love these songs. I mean, I don't know what else to say, except my one problem with this, obviously, is, well, I wouldn't say my one problem, but one of my problems is the gaps missing. But also, as much as I complain about Phil Spector on Let It Be, not only does he come back to remix Let It Be and somehow make it worse than the original, because I love his production on the original Let It Be. I think that's better than, it being stripped down. But not only does he come in on Long and Winding Road and out Spector himself, it's the way they end the album. I'm just like, come on, can we get rid of this piece of shit? I'm just sick of him. Terrible human being. I hate his production on this. Let's just keep him away from the Beatles, all right? But other than that, I mean, what can you say? You know these songs. You love these songs. It's the Beatles, and I'm glad to see them make the 21st century. And I think it's interesting because on every single countdown, the Beatles, either solo or on their own accords, are represented in some way, and that's no different here. I had this very high on my list, obviously, just by technicality. And glad to see the Beatles make the list.
Yeah, I'm not mad about it. As you know, and you feel the same way. I know they're my favorite band of all time. So
they're the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that they're on here. I'm not mad at it. I mean, I didn't personally, I didn't put any compilation albums on my list, just because, I mean, this is a tremendous compilation, especially if you're new to the Beatles.
What better way starting point?
Yeah, to get started into them and hear just some of the best of the best. Although, there were so many other singles that somehow weren't, I guess, number one hits that I would have loved to see on here as well. But yeah, I mean, there's, you get a little bit of everything. Let It Be, Hey Jude, Come Together, Something. But when I listen to the Beatles, typically I'm going straight to some of the classic albums, and that's usually what I do. And for most Beatles fanatics, I think would be the same. But for anyone new to the Beatles, you can't go wrong with one, man. That's really great. So.
And I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I like this more than the White Album. Sue me. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, the White Album is inconsistent as it is, as much as I do love it. But, if I want to sit down, I want to pop these songs on because I love every single one of them. I just don't like the Phil Spector stuff at the end because it kind of ruins it a little bit. Other than that, I mean, what can you say? Amazing choice, obviously. The Beatles, best band ever. I don't know. Really no debate there. And yeah, I mean, what a way to start this list.
And if there were no Beatles, there would be obviously no Tame Impala. And actually probably almost everybody that's made the list thus far. So
you're not wrong.
About influence,
And I think this list, whether we agree or not, is off to a very interesting. I mean, we have Death Grips and we have the Beatles. I mean, you couldn't get any further. Yeah. But my goodness, I'm so excited to count down the other 90 albums on this list. And John, obviously, if you guys haven't subscribed to Johnny Radio yet, I mean, I'm assuming you have at this point, but you got to check him out. Just hit 1,000 subscribers. Congratulations, my friend. You absolutely deserve it. And
yeah, man. This is, as always, it's a blast just hanging out with you on here and chatting through these records, man. Whether we agree or disagree, it is just always so fun to hang with the great Nathaniel Ahart. And obviously, if you're on here, hopefully you've subscribed to him as well. But if you haven't, what the hell are you waiting for, people? So, thank you so much, everybody, for voting. This has been a labor of love And yeah, it's gonna be great when we get to the top. You wait and see.
Absolutely, guys. So thank you again for tuning in and participating in this countdown. And we will see you guys next week for the second album of the top, or the second episode, I should say, of the top 100 albums of the 21st century. Take it easy now.
Peace.